As shown in the previous videos, the employee dashboard is a great starting point for both troubleshooting and remediation, but also to get an overall understanding of the digital experience in the environment. In this case, I've selected the last 7 days, but I can easily change that to, for example, a different time period like last month. And in the left widget, it will show the distribution of the different experiences categorized by good, fair and poor for all employees during that time period. The widgets next to it show information about applications, devices and unified communications calls, and if you're running NPS surveys, the user sentiment in the environment. The green numbers under it are the differences between the currently selected time period and the one before it, which would be last week. The score over time shows you the distribution per day over the selected time period, or if you select one day, over the hours of that day, and there's an option to compare with a previous time period. For example, if we look at May 7th, which was, I believe, a Tuesday, it will compare it with April 30th, the Tuesday before it. This way we can easily spot trends about or anomalies on the experience score and kind of like correlate that with certain actions that were done, maybe certain rollouts, certain patches, certain IT events that were happening that day. In addition to this, you can set filters. For example, by device group. We looked at a certain device group earlier. Obviously, when I select that, the numbers will go down because it's a much smaller sample set of devices and their employees that are using them. But also things like hardware models or location. For example, the country. I can just look at our office in Israel, or at least our end users in Israel. And this filter will persist across the different views. So if I go to the map view, now I just see the employees and their experience working from our Israel location. If I reset it, the map resets as well to the global view. The Details tab will show all the employees that were detected and for which we have recorded information. You can see things like the lowest and high score, the score over time, what device they were working on, what the most common problems were, common applications and remote sessions. Let's have a look at a particular user. So I'm going to make this list a little bit longer. And go to this user, which is me. And again, now I have a detailed view about just this user, the apps they were using, their devices they were working on. So this is not just restricted to a single device. This is not a device score. This is an employee score. How many minutes they were active and how many unified communications calls were recorded. Again, I get to see the score over time for this particular user, as well as the activity over time, which includes the devices they were working on, in this case only one. In this case, this device has been on and active for the whole time. Any applications they were running, so these are the foreground applications. And depending on your privacy settings, there could be certain information that is restricted or hidden from the interface. That data is not stored. As well as any remote sessions such as Citrix, Horizon or Microsoft AVD. If we go back and look at another user, you see that this user over the last 7 days obviously have a different activity timeline. If I go to today, I can see that earlier today, locked and active, probably lunch break here, and active. good security, locking the device, good behavior. And of course the various apps, and in this case the person was running a remote session but using AVD. Going back to the previous user, we're now looking at today, but we can further zoom in for the last few hours. All the way down to the minute by minute score. Although presented minute by minute, we do collect data from physical endpoints every 3 seconds. And that data is being used to see if certain experience algorithms are breached. Let's have a look at this one. You can see that if we click on it, we actually get the detailed breakdown about which metrics are causing the drop in experience score. In this case, it's CPU load on the device and memory utilization on their VDI session, which is currently the remote session indicated by this CD viewer, the active application, so the foreground application, which is a big difference in how ControlUp looks at experience scores. It is an employee score. It's not a technology score. So it takes into consideration things like the foreground application, activity. So if a user is not actually behind their desk using their keyboard and mouse, we will actually not collect experience information because that data at that point is irrelevant. Next, let's have a look at the experience score algorithm. You can access that quickly by clicking the settings button, which brings you to the experience score settings. The solution has 4 out-of-the-box profiles. You can recognize these by the little ControlUp bar. But these default 4 rules across unified communications calls, networking, VDI and DAS applications, and what we call the any application can be modified to your liking, or you can add new profiles. The built-in profiles guarantee that there's immediate time to value for a customer that is using ControlUp experience scoring. Before we look at these profiles, let's have a quick look here at the app groups. So you can set rules or profiles and conditions on individual apps, but you can also group apps logically together in an app group. So for example, there are some built-in groups, again recognizable by the little icon here, where we automatically have popular email clients, all common browsers, communication tools, collaboration tools, and VDI and DAS, which includes Microsoft, VMware or Omnissa, as well as Citrix. I can use AI to create new groups. So this will actually go look at all the applications that were run in the environment and propose a certain grouping. This takes a little while, so we've already ran one here. You can see it from this icon, where it recognizes various multimedia tools such as Spotify, some other multimedia tools, and group them together. You can also create an app group. I created this custom app group, super important apps, which includes, of course, the very important apps Notepad, and WordPad. But this is the easiest way to kind of like group applications together that can then be used in a profile. So I already created a profile, so we're going to have a look at this important app group. Now, we can, of course, do individual apps, but as I said before, we already created this super important app, so we're going to use that app group. But if you want to create separate profiles, for example, for certain SaaS applications, you can also include those for unified communications and other applications. The conditions are the actual metrics that are being used. So I have very granular control over a variety of metrics, either on the endpoint, such as application crashes, CPU, memory, disk queue length, all those kind of things, network latency, all kinds of metrics. There are certain specific unified communications metrics, such as the MOS score, the round trip time, packet loss and jitter. And for VDI, such as user input delay, total session latency, user logon duration, a very rich set of metrics that will be growing over time. Each metric that's added can be assigned a weight of importance, so there's very granular control over the conditions and the rules. And finally, we can assign a profile to a certain group of devices or based on device tag. One thing that I want to highlight here is the any application. So we can also, of course, set a specific profile to look after an application. However, if you don't configure anything, so you have no app groups, no apps, no URLs, and no unified comms, it will look at the overall performance of the device without taking into consideration the foreground app or anything like that. It will basically be a device profile. The last thing to highlight in this section is the privacy settings. First of all, the first layer is that you can collect only the experience scores for employees in specified domains. So in this case, nothing is configured. So we saw earlier that there were Gmail accounts and other kind of like personal accounts. If we would set this to just at ControlUp.com, then we will only collect data for devices that are actually using a ControlUp.com UPN, or are logged into Teams, or logged in with a Microsoft account with using this specific domain. In addition to that, we can also restrict what applications and domains are being stored. So if you, for example, want to restrict collection of information only for particular applications, particular domains, maybe you want to do some restrictions based on Active Directory group, and even restrict data collection across certain time zones or in certain time settings. So for example, during daytime only, during business hours, all these things can be configured, and these settings can be restricted by role-based access control. For the final part of this demo, we want to have a look at our surveying tool and our sentiment collection. Our survey tool comes with a media library where customers can use their own branding and assets to customize templates that are being sent. We have templates. These templates are basically the type of questions, the branding elements, the intros and the outros of the surveys, and then based off these templates they can create a survey. So let's take as an example, we want to do a digital experience sentiment survey. And this one is just going to sales, so we can create multiple surveys based on the same template, and then we can compare the results, between different departments, between different locations. We can even, do this by device groups or device types so that you can compare different types of endpoints. I'm going to select the already created template. I can configure if this is a single survey, if it's a campaign, so on a recurring basis, or a one-time on demand. For example, if I want to send after an IT support ticket closed. But in this case, I'm going to make it recurring. I want to start this tomorrow on a monthly basis. Then I can select who we're targeting. So we can select specific device or Active Directory groups. I don't have a sales group here, but for example, if this would be a certain group, I can also exclude certain users. So if I, for example, want to exclude leadership from these surveys, I can configure that here. Or alternatively, I can do it based on device groups or Active Directory machine groups.